Hi, Alaska photographer Jeff Schultz here, and today I'm going to talk about the backstory of how I create some of my Faces of Alaska photos. In particular, this picture of Jessica, a bear guide out at Lake Clark National Park. Faces of Alaska was born out of my Faces of Iditarod project. The uniqueness of Faces of Iditarod was the consistent lighting, studio background, and posing of the subject combined with the idea that I asked the subject 4 pertinent questions about themselves and recorded their voice. On the website, you have the option of reading the answers or actually listening to the subject response.
There's not many things that's sure in life, but if you're lucky enough to wake up tomorrow morning after you go to sleep tonight, then everything's fine.
For me, hearing their voice is phenomenal. The main difference with Faces of Alaska is rather than the usual studio background, I used the natural environment the subject was in at the time. But I still use some unique lighting and ask questions and record their voice for you to see and hear on the website. I also crop the images to a square format, just something I like to do. The first thing I do with these Faces of Alaska shoots is pick a background that goes with the subject. As a bear guide at this lodge, only on the chilly mornings, Jessica would dress in a faux fur hat with bear ears. Just something fun she likes to do. And you know, that hat, combined with all the other gear she wears, made me decide to photograph her early in the morning, in her boat, and with the Chigmik Mountains in the background. That, and the early light in the morning on the mountains in the background, is just purple and perfect. Having the location, the next thing I do is decide what kind of exposure I want for the background. And most always I want the background darker than the subject itself. Because a viewer's eye tends to go to the brightest part of a photo, I always want the subject to be the brightest part of the photo. So I purposely underexpose the background slightly. The main ingredient to the exposure is considering just how much depth of field I want. And in this particular case, I was shooting with a 28mm lens and I was 10 or so feet from Jessica. So based on using the focus peaking option on my Canon R5, I used f9 to give me some depth of field, but not complete depth of field throughout. So with that in mind at f9, I could then figure out the proper exposure, which was just a matter of setting the ISO and the shutter speed that would work with that f9 and keep the background dark. In the shade of the light I was in, at ISO 100, my shutter speed was over 1/2 of a second at f9. So in this case, I wanted to use a shorter shutter speed, something not so long that Jessica might move during the exposure. So, in order to get a faster shutter speed, I just increased my ISO. In this case, I went to ISO 400, which gave me a 1/8 of a second shutter speed. Normally when photographing Faces of Alaska, I use a big Godox 8600 Pro battery-powered studio flash with this Westcott 24-inch collapsible beauty dish. But because I was pressed for weight on this trip flying in, I simply used my lightweight portable Canon 600 EX RT flash with a tiny collapsible softbox similar to this Velo Mini. And to control the flash, I use Canon's ST-E3 RT controller on my hot shoe. Real nice and simple to be able to control the flash right from my location. And because of the weight, I didn't even bring a light stand. Instead, I enlisted the help of the lodge manager to hold the flash. The light position is what makes the subject stands out. It's typically high, just above the subject, and very slightly off to the side, enough to make real nice shadows, and those shadows on their bodies pop, but not too much shadow on their face. This is always a bit tricky because of the human light stand really needs to hold the flash in a near exact position in order to light the face just right. And oftentimes they move just a little bit. But in any way, it worked out great. Here are a couple other images from other faces showing the light position. So then it was just a matter of dialing the flash output correctly using that ST-E3 controller to be approximately f9 output, which is what you can see here. It was just a matter of viewing the image once it was shot and then dialing the flash up or down based on what I saw. The final image was cropped slightly into the square format. I processed the image in Lightroom and made a couple of adjustments there to tweak the color and background exposure using a brush tool. I later interviewed Jessica in a quiet location to get her answers to the questions, and all that appears on the website at facesofalaska.com.
Alaska has captured my heart in many ways, and maybe I'm just a little biased because I grew up here.
So there you have it. That's how I create my Faces of Alaska portraits. And I hope you liked that behind the scenes look. If you did, I'd be grateful if you click the thumbs up. And if you would like and subscribe to my video, that would be wonderful. And as always, thank you for your support. Bye-bye.